everybody. Mrs. Watts here on a Wednesday night. I'm here to read The Tale of Jeremy Fisher by Beatrix Potter. So this is a story about a frog that wants to go fishing and what happens one day when he does that. So let's see. Here we go. Once upon a time, there was a frog called Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He lived in a little damp house amongst the buttercups at the edge of a pond. The water was all slippy-sloppy in the larder and in the back passage. But Mr. Jeremy liked getting his feet wet. Nobody ever scolded him, and he never caught a cold. He was quite pleased when he looked out and saw large drops of rain splashing in the pond. "I will get some worms and go fishing, and catch a dish of minnows for my dinner," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. "If I catch more than 5 fish, I will invite my friends, Mr. Alderman Tortoise and Mr. Isaac Newton. The alderman, however, eats salad." Mr. Jeremy put on a mackintosh and a pair of shiny galoshes. Well, those are some old-fashioned words, aren't they? So a mackintosh, I believe, is like a raincoat. And a pair of shiny galoshes is a fun word that means boots. Galoshes. So those are rain boots. He took his rod and his basket and set off with enormous hops to the place where he kept his boat. Wasn't that silly? Having a boat when you're a frog. The boat was round and green and very like the other lily leaves. It was tied to a water plant in the middle of the pond. That's curious. Mr. Jeremy took a reed pole and pushed the boat out into open water. "I know a good place for minnows, little fish," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. Mr. Jeremy stuck his pole into the mud and fastened his boat to it. Then he seated himself cross-legged and arranged his fishing tackle. He had the dearest little red float. His rod was a tough stalk of grass. His line was a long, fine white horsehair, and he tied a little wiggly worm at the end. This is my favorite picture right here. See how he's sitting cross-legged? Isn't that adorable? I love that picture. The rain trickled down his back, and for nearly an hour he stared at the float. The float is the little ball that's on the fishing pole, and it bobs up and down in the water. So he's staring and staring, and no fish are coming along. "This is getting tiresome. I think I should like some lunch," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He punted back again amongst the water plants and took some lunch out of his basket. "I will eat a butterfly sandwich and wait until the shower is over," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. And here he is, chilling out on the lily pad, eating his lunch. That's another great picture. A great big water beetle came up underneath the lily leaf and tweaked the toe of one of his galoshes. Remember what I said galoshes were? Rain boots. That's right. Mr. Jeremy crossed his legs up shorter out of reach and went on eating his sandwich. Once or twice something moved about with a rustle and a splash among the rushes at the side of the pond. "I trust that it is not a rat," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. "I think I had better get away from here." Mr. Jeremy shoved the boat out again a little way and dropped in the bait. There was a bite almost directly. The float gave a tremendous bob. A minnow, and I have him by the nose, cried Mr. Jeremy Fisher, jerking up his fishing rod. But what a horrible surprise! Instead of a smooth, fat minnow, Mr. Jeremy landed little Jack Sharp, the stickleback, covered with spines. The stickleback fish floundered about the boat, pricking and snapping until he was quite out of breath, and then he jumped back in the water. That was not the kind of fish that he was looking for. And a shoal of other little fishes put their heads out and laughed at Mr. Jeremy Fisher. And while Mr. Jeremy sat on the edge of his boat, sucking his sore fingers and peering down into the water, a much worse thing happened, a very frightful thing it would have been if Mr. Jeremy was not wearing a mackintosh. A great, big, enormous trout came up, kerflop, with a splash. It seized Mr. Jeremy with a snap. Ow, ow, ow! And then it turned and dived down to the bottom of the pond. Here's poor Mr. Jeremy. But the trout was so displeased with the taste of the mackintosh jacket that in less than half a minute it spat him out again, and the only thing it swallowed was Mr. Jeremy's galoshes. Thank goodness. Mr. Jeremy bounced up to the surface of the water like a cork, and the bubbles out of a soda water bottle, and he swam with all of his might to the edge of the pond. He scrambled out on the first bank he came to, and he hopped home across the meadow with his mackintosh all in tatters. So his jacket was quite a mess. What a mercy it was not a pike, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. I have lost my rod and basket, but it does not much matter, for I am sure I would never have dared to go fishing again. He put some sticking plaster on his fingers, and his friends both came to dinner. He could not offer them fish, but he had something else in his larder. It's another word for pantry. Mr. Isaac Newton wore his black and gold waistcoat. And here come his friends over for dinner. And Mr. Alderman Tortoise brought a salad with him in a string bag. And instead of a nice dish of minnows, they had a roasted grasshopper with ladybird sauce, which frogs consider a beautiful treat, but I think it must have been nasty. The end. And there they are, enjoying dinner together. So there you have it, the tale of Mr. Jeremy Fisher and the day that he tried to go fishing. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story. I miss you guys tons. And tomorrow I will be back with a different story by Beatrix Potter. And you notice that there's some things that all of these stories have in common. So tomorrow I'm going to ask you about that. So be thinking about that. Okay? All right. Well, have a good night. Bye.